Up next, it's going to be Emily Carver, and she's going to tell us why the judge was right to sentence the Dartford Crossing Bridge scalers from the Just Stop Oil to prison. Start the clock.
Well, 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 how the mighty have fallen. It must have seemed like such a cunning plan to scale the bridge over the Dartford crossing and hoist a Just Stop Oil banner for all to see, far and wide. But unfortunately for the two lads involved in this particular stunt, they found they've been hoisted by their own petard, haven't they? They're going to be spending years in prison as a result. And I think that's absolutely the right decision. Now, of course, there are lawyers, activist lawyers like Julian Moore, best known for clubbing a fox to death wearing his wife's kimono, who've come out in defence of the pair. He says they're prisoners of conscience. He says they're victims of a morally abject sentence decision. But I say the judge is absolutely right to jail these plonkers. I want more of this. I want more of these tough sentences for these people. They break the law, they disrupt our lives, and that's that.
Well done.
Well, there we go. I finished a little bit too soon. Now, Albie, I'll come to you on
We'll
this.
say nothing.
Now, there's been quite a lot of people. I was going to say this is a serious show, but no, it's not. It's a fun show on a Saturday night. Albie, now, there have been some people in the commentariat and lawyers like Julian Moore who've said that this is a ridiculous sentence for what could be seen as a peaceful protest. What do you think?
I think the sentence does seem quite tough. I am in favour of tough sentencing for serious crimes, but I am actually also acutely aware that prisons are overcrowded and we cannot house all of the people that need to go to prison. So is this the best use, in my opinion, of public sector money, of taxpayers' money, sending these people to prison? I might agree with the fact that they've been sentenced harshly, but then if I think, should they actually be in prison? Should taxpayers be paying for them to be in prison? Is there another way that they could be punished?
Well, they've apparently cost the economy hundreds of thousands of pounds in business by doing this. And of course, there was one heavily pregnant woman who couldn't get to hospital. Another person couldn't go to a funeral of her best friend. They're already costing us a lot, aren't they, Darren?
Absolutely, and this all comes at a time, as you well know, where the NHS is on its knees, right? And people can't, for love nor money, get a hold... Well, they can if they've got money, but they can't get a GP appointment and can't get to hospital in time. Ambulance waiting times through the roof. If some... I was going to swear there. If some plonker is in the middle of the road, right, blocking an ambulance from getting through, that's going to exacerbate that problem. I saw today two cop cars were in front of what was a Just Stop Oil blockade. And a guy said to the coppers, "What are you going to do about them?" And the cop replied, "They've got a right to be there." Now, I've got a right to get to a hospital, thank you very much.
Darren. But, Benjamin, do you think the judge was right to make an example of these plonkers, as you might call them, or do you think, a bit too tough?
I mean, many great social warriors for causes that we now accept went to prison. Nelson Mandela spent a long time in prison.
You're not going to mention the suffragettes, are you?
Mandela spent many years in prison for a cause that we now widely accept was obviously the right one. Look back to the early movement of the gay rights movement, when lots of them would do similar techniques to what we now see from Extinction Rebellion, and they would get pulled up in court and go to prison in some cases for that. And now no one says that being gay should be a criminal offence. And I think that's what these eco people are doing. The truth is that we have a climate crisis coming, and they are trying to stop us from walking into that or sinking into
I thought it had already come, Leo.
Yeah, and it's an absolute nonsense. They've got these ideals. They want us all to go back to living in a cave, huddling around a tea light. It's not going to work. Look at China. Look at India. They're burning so much coal. Whatever we do isn't going to make any difference at all, apart from ruin the standard of our lives. And it's a safety issue. Prison needs to be a deterrent for these people because, as we've seen, as you pointed out, the police are aiding and abetting them, so they need to be deterred.
And a paper that Benjamin likes quite a lot posted stats recently from ambulance services saying that 15 people a day last year were brought in for hypothermia because of the fact they cannot afford fuel. So I'm afraid you people are exacerbating that crisis. So poor old people who are terrified to put the heating on, you're making that 10 times worse.
Well, the reason heating's so expensive is because of some dictator in Russia, right?
It's because actually we are a natural resource-rich country. We have resources here that you are saying we cannot exploit because we must be, a shining beacon to the world of this madness.
I mean, look, nothing shows the idiocy and the short-termism of your argument. Like the fact that if you're worried about people getting hypothermia or people dying from heat waves, which are going up in record numbers, well, you're going to have far more of those extreme weather events. We already are because of climate change.
You said that in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Guess what? The world hasn't burnt to a crisp.
Actually, the world is considerably hotter now. You see incredible flooding in Germany last year that killed huge numbers. You saw a third of Bangladesh underwater. You saw the worst wildfires in Australia in history. Why don't you explain that, Darren?
How about, let's go back to the sentencing issue for these guys. The judge obviously wanted to make an example of these guys. If they're not going to be imprisoned, Leo, what do you reckon an alternative punishment could be?
I think, because they're intent on everybody bringing down their carbon footprint to zero, so I think they should have their carbon footprint brought to zero by throwing them off that bridge.
Wow, OK, we do not want any violence, I must say that. Ofcom might tell us off for that. If not prison, what else could be a good
perhaps
punishment?
They could do some kind of community service, do something helpful, do something useful. I think prison should be reserved for the most serious offences. I'm not really a fan of people just being made examples of just to get kind of media headlines. I think prison is there. It plays an important role in society. Do I think these people should be going to prison for years? I'm just not sure.
I mean, let's be honest. We've seen lots of stories of people that have committed sex offences, for example, really serious things that have a huge effect on the rest of the victim's life, not getting custodial sentences.
It's whataboutery, though, because none of us are saying that we don't want those people to stay in prison for longer.
But it's not whataboutery, because we know in the last couple of years you've had judges making decisions about whether someone gets a prison cell based on the fact that there are very few prison cells, so they're not pushing them in there.
Precisely.
And so how do you square that circle? Is this person, and I think what they did was dangerous, right? There's no getting around that, even though I support the cause, so I can understand why it was a criminal offence. But is society really more threatened by that eco-protester than it is, someone who's done something paedophilic or a sex offence?
Well, I guess it depends on... Firstly, I do think you're right that this judge took this decision to set an example, and that in one way or another you could potentially argue that it was politically motivated, but also because for so long these protesters have been allowed to disrupt. These people weren't first-time offenders, or at least one of them was a repeat offender of this kind of thing. And the disruption, OK, public nuisance might not sound as bad as, obviously, sexual assault or something like that, but the disruption that it caused is huge.
And you mentioned Julian Moron, QC, or whatever his name is, Casey now, isn't it? But he was saying, actually, he was trying to get all his mates in the judiciary to say that they wouldn't ever go after
Oh, no. Well, coming up after the break, that was a fun one, it's Darren's debate.